The Federal Reserve has raised rates by another 75 points, matching last month's historic rise. That's the fourth interest rate hike this year as the US grapples with record high inflation. Our Washington correspondent Annalise Nielsen joins us live now from Washington, D.C. Annalise, why did the Federal Reserve decide against a full percentage point, which was expected?
Well, they said it was discussed, but they weren't going to go that far, even though they did say they would go that far if they thought it was necessary. But we heard from the chair, Jerome Powell, today that there's enough other factors that are pointing in a positive direction that they decided that 0.75% was the way to go. This was expected in this meeting, even though that is a historic high. What we saw was the exact same last month, and that was the highest that we'd seen in a very long time. Really, the figures we're looking at hark back to the 1980s, and that's because inflation has been such a major issue, especially the CPI figures coming in at 9.1%. It was already predicted to be 8.8%, and so to come in over estimate at that extraordinarily high figure, this is why they're really taking this quite seriously. We heard from the chair today that he says that the positive indicators here is the labour market.
We're trying to do just the right amount, right? We're not trying to have a recession, and we don't think we have to. We think that there's a path for us to be able to bring inflation down while sustaining a strong labor market. As I mentioned, along with, in all likelihood, some softening in labor market conditions. So that's what we're trying to achieve, and we continue to think that there's a path to that. We know that the path has clearly narrowed, really based on events that are outside of our control, and it may narrow further.
So what they're trying to do here is temper supply but not overdo demand within the market, because that's when it's going to get out of control. One of the other figures that they've been discussing has been GDP. We find out that figure tomorrow in the US, and it's almost certainly going to indicate that the US is in a technical recession. So a technical recession is 2 quarters of negative growth. But the White House has been busy spinning this, saying that it's not technically a technical recession because there's enough other factors influencing the economy, including the labour markets that we heard referenced there. It's been viewed with a lot of scepticism, and the reporters during this press conference asked Jerome Powell time and time again if he thought the US was going to be in recession tomorrow. He mostly avoided trying to answer it, but at this point he did directly confront the issue.
I do not think the US is currently in a recession. And the reason is there are just too many areas of the economy that are performing, too well. And of course, I would point to the labor market in particular. As I mentioned, it's true that growth is slowing, and for reasons that we understand. Really, the growth was extraordinarily high last year, 5.5%.
So he says the US isn't currently in a recession. He didn't want to answer whether that would be still true this time tomorrow when we know the GDP figures. There's been a lot of skepticism around how the White House has presented this too. They also said that inflation figures were going to be transitory, and they most certainly have not been. And then the other factor they've said is that all the price hikes across the country have been Putin's price hikes, when there's other factors, of course, influencing this as well beyond global supply chains. There's also the influence of the Biden administration cracking down on oil drilling in the United States. And so that's been a long-running battle as well, as prices do continue to rise.
OK, Annalise Nielsen bringing us up to speed there, live from Washington. Thank you.